And we're live. Good afternoon. This is Jim Miller, your host of the Bold Leadership Story Show. And we talk about the experiences shaping exceptional lives. And today I have the honor of speaking with Yvette Dubel. And Yvette is a visionary leader, an innovator known for her pioneering work in creative interventions for life-changing outcomes. And we're going to learn all about that mouthful here today. As the founder of Empowered Innovations, an author, artist researcher, micro habits, and Artful Living Coach, Yvette combines her expertise in art-based wellness, empowerment, and strategic interventions to transform lives and communities. Welcome to the show, Yvette.
Thank you, Jim. Glad to be here.
Wow, all that going on. It sounds so amazing. I'm looking forward to learning what that all is today.
I'm looking forward to sharing it with you.
Awesome. So how did you get started with these ideas? Because they're kind of off the beaten path, but not, it seems like.
Years ago, I was in a bookstore complaining about not finding the kind of book that I was looking for. And
Okay.
One of my friends, the friend that I was with, said, well, that means you should write it. And then years later.
A wise friend.
Right.
Are you friends?
And so I did start doing freelance writing, but basically just wanting to do something that didn't exist yet.
Okay.
And I just decided, well, initially, I wanted to go back to school, and that didn't quite work out. And I really couldn't find a path to do it where I could learn what I wanted to learn to do what I wanted to do, rather than if I had to borrow money, I was going to have to get a job to pay back that money right away. And that was going to defeat the purpose of what I was trying to do. And so I just decided, I thought I had a dissertation in me, and I just started working on that. And that was a PB Wiki research site where I first began exploring art-based research and developing my community change framework. And it just all kind of grew from there. I just started finding pilot projects and learning about how to do a research project by doing it. And I collaborated and wrote a few articles, contributed to a couple of books with some other more well-known big artist researchers or art-based researchers in Canada. And that gave me the confidence to claim it and say, this is what I do.
So who is it that you're really focused on helping at this point?
Really, well, my first thought was really people who are not represented, people who are not often seen, or we're not seen at the decision-making table. So one of the projects that I'm working with, that our mutual friend Florin is helping me with, is the apprenticeship preparation program.
Okay. Is that through a local university, or?
That is actually with regional economic development planning committees.
Okay.
So there's that's part of how a great democracy works. So each region, for every region, we have the Department of Commerce nationally. Then within each region, that money comes down, and there's an economic development planning committee that decides how that money will be spent, specifically with regards to underserved communities. And so you have to get involved in the planning process of that before you can get to the phase of getting a project rolling out.
Okay. So tell me of maybe a recent project you've worked on, if you can.
Sure. Well, the one we're working on now is this apprenticeship training program for youth that are aging out of foster care and group homes and survivors of human trafficking. Specifically because the issue, people would tend to think we want to get them into jobs so that they'll, become a burden on the state or become part of the unhoused or, aren't further victimized. But there's some support resources that are needed for them to succeed in those jobs or in any position. and transitioning into society as adults.
Mm.
And so that's where I think we can come in and help bridge that gap. And I want to provide the art wellness programs that I do as part of that to help with managing your own emotions, learning, developing better coping skills, managing triggers, because that's especially important for survivors of trauma, to be able to manage those triggers, because that not being able to manage triggers in an employment situation is directly related to people not being able to manage their lives and ending up unhoused.
Mm.
And so if we can get involved early, before there's that buildup of additional trauma, then I think we can make a real difference, and that this can be a part of addressing our unhoused community's needs.
Beautiful. What do you see as the most rewarding part of that to you?
Being able to share, well, I did a presentation in, I think it was in San Diego, we were together,
Mhm.
about art as a micro habit for
Mhm.
avoiding overwhelm and focusing on what matters most. And
Mhm.
being able to share that with other people and seeing the difference that that makes. Like, people may start out not believing, but then seeing the difference when seeing them a year later, 2 years later, and how much better they're doing. That is really that's why I do what I do.
Awesome. That's great. Explain to me, if you will, what is a strategic intervention? I've heard that term before, but I really don't know what that means.
Well, I think strategic has to do with personalized, right? Because it has to be what's going to reach that individual person, and then the other part of the strategy is timing. Um, Interventions only work when someone's really open to being intervened. They have to be open to it. It's almost when they're that point where they're asking for the help, almost. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Because there has to be a point where they're receptive to what you're offering. And the strategy is how you have that conversation and when you have that conversation.
So how do you get connected with somebody like that? That's like ready for it, but how do they know how to find you? I mean, an
Um,
intervention to me is like, okay, it's like a surprise. It's like somebody just
well, it
surprises
can
you
be
with,
done that way. At that point, that's not usually what I do. That's,
okay,
generally that's when whatever your issue is has become tough, so disruptive to the people around you that they take charge,
right.
and
Yeah, it's like,
schedule an
okay, you got to
intervention.
do this, dude, or there's going to be consequences.
I actually had an intervention when I was 17, but it was about interracial dating.
Okay.
So, like, warned me that I'd better stop it, and that I
Mm.
needed to choose one and stick with it.
Okay. Was she right?
Absolutely not. It was insane, but whatever.
All right.
It
All right.
was my family. It was my aunts and my grandmother.
Well,
Um,
why did they do that? What was the reasoning behind it? What was it? What was their fear?
that no, no decent black man would marry me.
Okay.
That was their
Wow.
fear.
Okay.
And I ended up marrying a very decent white man. So there you go.
Okay. Yeah. There's a few of us around.
Well, they were making a lot of assumptions that weren't true. And
Uh-huh.
so I didn't really take it seriously. But I think the interventions really are very important. And I have participated in an intervention. And that really is just when somebody's so out of control and their behavior is negatively impacting others around them. And I see that sort of intervention as the
Mhm.
first step before you break off a relationship.
Okay. Okay. So it's like um, an initial start to a new phase in somebody's life, maybe.
Yes, in the South, we used to call it a come to Jesus moment. Uh,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So you seem I've heard you talk about the art-based wellness
mhm.
that you do more frequently, I think, than anything else that you've mentioned. So tell me about that. What is it that you get you excited about that?
Well, art has saved my life time and time again. So I am just a huge proponent, advocate, and believer. Um, I feel like art is my first language. Like I have to speak to everybody in English because that's what everybody speaks. But in my perfect world, I would speak in art. But nobody, very few people would understand that. So this is what we did.
Give me an example of speaking in art. What do you say?
Um,
I'll pretend I can translate.
I instead of having a conversation, I would walk away and go create art and come back and be like, here, this is my answer. This is my response to whatever it is. Somebody asked me, what did I want to do with my life? Excuse me. Mm-hmm. And that's what really put me on this path, like in a conscious way. And I left the conversation, and this was back in the days of Skype, when Skype ruled. I went outside and took a walk in like a drizzle rain. And I remember at the time I was still in North Carolina, and I walked around this tree in our backyard several times. I was doing this figure 8 around this group of these trees in my backyard. And then it came to me, this mandala. I came inside, drew the mandala, and then I took it and I was like, this is my answer. This is what I want to do. And then he said, so what does that mean? I was like, I don't know. That's what we're going to find out. And so ever since then, I did a series of deconstructions of that mandala over the next year that were related to different projects that I was dealing with or working with and frustrated by. And that was how this became like my process. Okay. A piece of art would precede a proposal or anything that I was writing or doing. I would work it out through the artwork. And I just found that wasn't something that everybody could understand or accept. And so I would have to me, it feels a little bit like I have to transcribe that, right? I have to transcribe that into something for people who don't speak that language.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. I've been challenged in communicating with people, and I've realized this with my kids and with other people that I work with, that some people are verbal, some people are visual, and some people are what they call kinesthetic, right? They learn best through action. And what I'm hearing you say is that you communicate through art, kind of the same way as those other 3 categories.
I mean, again, it's like you have to, I think that I probably would have tested somewhere on some sort of autistic spectrum back in the day, but we didn't do that back then. And so I think that I've just adapted, I developed an elaborate system of like managing a lot of things that could have been problematic. Yeah. So I think we talked about the art journals, and you've seen me with these at our meetings. Yeah. And so this is how I use this to like manage my attention, to avoid getting overwhelmed by like the different projects. I'm working with UCR Medical. Hold on, let me close this window. There's somebody cutting the grass up there. UCR Medical Prime Scholars, and developing an art-based program for that. Based on my Cure for Racism book that I did. I did a Cure for Racism project during the pandemic. And so I developed since then an art-based coaching model. And so I've created a curriculum for the UCR medical scholars that will help them with developing better awareness of bias and learning a process to confront and process that. And then also learning how to be more responsive to the community that they're serving, and actually empower their patients.
Okay. So it's like a whole new set of tools.
Yes. And so my framework is called the Soul Food Framework. And one of the reasons for that is I like to look at it in terms of ingredients, meals, dishes, that way of thinking about it. And so it's really about me customizing this for different people. Like some people can take heat and like spicy, some people don't. So you take the spice out. So it's like about customizing it and figuring out which ingredients are needed. So like for UCR, since we're dealing more with racism and bias, the art and the conversation, the way things are contextualized, are focused more on that.
Okay. What's your favorite project so far?
Oh gosh. They're all my favorite when I'm working on them. Whatever I'm doing now is my favorite. And yeah, so I'm excited about getting these things going, and then developing a training to train somebody else to do it, and then moving on to like the next thing. I came here to start a think tank using art-based methodologies to prototype social solutions. And I didn't know how that would work or what that would look like. And now I'm getting a sense that this is what it would look like. It's almost like a pop-up type thing. I think I'll be starting an institute, a nonprofit institute to umbrella this. I'm going to be doing a suicide intervention, again, art-based meetup type structure for that, and doing some retreats related to expanding that, particularly focusing on African American women in academia. There's been an uptick in suicides in general, but that community in particular is getting a lot of attention right now. And so each of these things is I'm exploring prototyping a social solution, and this is how I think we can spur social innovation.
Interesting. So social solution. That's an interesting term. What can you give me an example of what a social solution is?
So like what we were talking about with the kids aging out of group homes, there's a connection between those kids and human trafficking. Many of them become victims of human trafficking because they're in a desperate situation, or they become unhoused or end up incarcerated and things like that. So that's a social problem. But part of that problem is that there's the lack of emotional support, what we call supportive services for them. It's not just about job placement. You know what I mean? Like there are people that are helping with job placement and job skills, but they're not dealing with what keeps them from succeeding in those jobs. And the not being able to handle trauma triggers unravels people's lives. That's one of the biggest. And then once they're unhoused, they're doubly or triple traumatized. They become victims of, violence on the streets. So then they're doubly traumatized. So those are social problems that we need a solution for. And as somebody who has survived trauma, I understand trauma. I understand how you survive, learn to thrive in spite of trauma. And art is a big part of that. And learning how to not allow triggers to spin out of control, or not even to not be so easily triggered that's a skill that one has to learn. And so these are all things that are part of the struggle that these two communities have that are not currently addressed. Why? Why?
Which two communities are you talking about?
Survivors of human trafficking and kids aging out of foster care and group homes. Like there's some overlap there. Like kids who age out of group homes oftentimes become victims of human trafficking. And so it's like I've talked to some people who, I shouldn't say, I've heard stories and had conversations with people who work with the criminal side of the human trafficking situation. And there's such, excuse me, despair and sort of defeatism about almost like the problem is so big and they have so much access and there's nothing we can do about it. And so I'm looking at rather than just having that attitude of there's nothing we can do about it, that seems like a very easy thing, and it's not a lot of money or resources to provide. What Florin is doing with Bright Business and bringing that to these young people so that they develop these skills, learn how to look someone in the eye, shake their hand, introduce yourself, learning how to ask questions. That seem like really small things that are a big deal, that they may or may not be a part of a workforce development program, depending on what they're trying to train them for. And so some of these young people may have entrepreneurial aspirations. So introducing them because a lot of times when you're from a bad community or a bad neighborhood, or I shouldn't say bad, a low income neighborhood, let me not say bad, but a low income neighborhood, maybe what the most accessible small business owners you see or have access to who will talk to you are not legitimate, the legitimate businesses that you want shaping young people. That's certainly something that I saw growing up in my neighborhood. And so kids who aren't oriented towards something more academic just aren't going to encounter the same kind of people. And that's one of the biggest struggles that people face when they're trying to change their lives, is how do I position myself in a different community? And it's really hard to just inject yourself when you don't know anybody, right? You're not going to just come to one of these group meetings that we're having if you don't know anybody, even if you're really intimidated. And
Sure.
so,
Especially if you've had a background that you might think, you might be coming in with a set of beliefs that you're less than for some reason. If you,
exactly, right.
yeah, and it makes it really, I imagine you're right, very difficult.
Yes.
So
I think it helps to have someone invite you in, right? And reassure you that you're welcome and that we want to help you. And then finding people who will come in and speak to them. And I think that just having, and when I ran a fatherhood initiative, that was one of the first programs that I did with adults. And it was really helpful for them to have other people come in and share stories about how their fathers were impactful in their lives, so that they could understand how important they were as fathers, and that they are an important resource for not just their children, but our whole community. And that's what I want these young people to feel. I want them to understand that they're an important resource, an important part of our community. And it's just their voices that are just not normally considered in economic development, but they're a big part of the problem side. So we need to consider them on the thriving side of our economic development planning. And that's basically, that's a social solution.
Okay. All right. Okay. This is all, I mean, I've been in business for a minute or two. A lot of the terms that you're using are kind of foreign to me, frankly.
Okay.
And that poses to me an opportunity, maybe, that there's a disconnect between the business side and what you're talking about. I see an opportunity in that both components of that, the business side and your population, need each other, right?
Right.
But there's a communication gap.
Right.
The language is different.
Well, this is my language. This is not the language that like our clients would use, right?
Okay, I'm just making an observation. We're not going to solve anything here, but I just.
Well, you forget that the language that you're using isn't the language that everybody's using until you talk to somebody that says, like, what does that mean? You know what I mean?
Right. But it's like when I go into a new account, like, I don't know, I was at one point in my career, I was working with companies like Apple Computer and Microsoft and Hewlett Packard. And you could lump all three of those companies into electronics companies, right? Mm-hmm. But when you get inside and you start to learn their culture and who they are and what they're about, they're all completely different. Their language is similar, but it's different. Their way they operate is different. The way they make decisions is different. The way they communicate internally is different. And so it's that knowledge, and it maybe, that's where you're filling that gap. You're kind of like that conduit between the two, and you're helping to fill, make each party feel comfortable and integrating the two ideas into one, so that there's a solution that serves both and the community.
Yes.
So that's really cool. That's admirable. That's bold. Because it's like nobody's doing that I know of. I mean, it's really hard work.
Well, I didn't think of it as being hard work. That's not usually how I think of it.
I didn't mean to implant that, but it's like, to me, that would be something that you need to be constantly working towards an objective, and it's takes a lot of effort and passion, maybe, or inspiration.
That is definitely true, because it definitely you get into the minutia of democracy, because there's a lot of subcommittees, a lot of committee meetings. So this is just the So I've just proposed this as a catalyst project. So we're still at the feasibility study phase.
Right.
And so it's a multi-year endeavor. And like I said, I got involved just with the planning to even get these as priorities on the regional economic development map. So apprenticeships and internships is on the map. You know what I mean? So these marginalized communities of interest to me are now on the map. Mm-hmm. So that's a start. Social enterprise as an innovation sector, the creative economy as a sector for the region. Those are now on the map for the region's economic development planning. So that's a start, So that was more than I was able to do in North Carolina in like 20 years. Mm-hmm. So that feels like an accomplishment already.
Excellent. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Maybe I wanted to bring up your website, YvetteDubel.com.
Okay.
That'd be all right?
Yeah.
So let's hang on. Let me pull it up. How do I do that? There we go. So we've got that, and I can pull that up. So that's YvetteDubel.com. Tell us about this site.
That was the first one that I started when I moved, and it was sort of like almost like a public relations site. It was like one stop to learn kind of like everything about me. So I think it just sort of like introduces broadly that the problem that I help people address is that 90% of people have regrets, but don't know how to move forward productively with them.
Okay.
And then I think I give like some tips on how micro habits can help. And I invite people to go to productivityforus.com and learn about my approach to creative productivity. And that's my art-based approach to organizing myself and helping people learn to customize that. Fundamental to my approach is seeing organizations like businesses, communities as complex adaptive systems. So I use art to focus on personal innovation. And this is where I just you can get an introduction to what that's about. And then I think down at the bottom of there are links to like the different things that people can learn about me. Go productivity.com, creative productivity for us. I don't even remember what else is there. No, my concept papers are linked there. My media kit. Pretty much anything people want to know. It's there.
Very cool. So yeah, if you want to get in touch with Yvette, go to YvetteDubel.com.
And I think there's a gallery with some of my artwork. I keep meaning to add more, but it's really hard to decide what to add.
Let me click on that and see what happens. Yeah, it doesn't click over. So.
Oh my gosh, if the gallery is not working, that's not good.
No, the gallery's working. It's StreamYard. It doesn't.
Gotcha. Open a new tab. Gotcha.
It doesn't let me click on a different page and broadcast it. So anyway, that's okay.
That's okay.
Just go to YvetteDubel.com and you can check it out yourself. Let's see. I will take that back up here, and we'll pull that back down. Awesome. So let's see. What kind of workshops are you doing at this point?
I am working on developing, the one I'm doing for UCR, that's going to be an ongoing workshop for the scholars at UCR Medical. That will be a breakout workshop with those students. And then the suicide intervention prevention, that's going to be a workshop series. And I am developing that with the Center Against Racism and Trauma and the NAACP at the moment. Mm-hmm. And we may have some other partners, but I can't really speak about them just yet. But that's something that we're working on. Because I definitely want to do that for diverse communities.
Okay, awesome. And then this is your productivity for us site.
Yes.
So tell us what's going on here.
I think that's just the banner there. If you scroll down, there's a freebie that people can get. There's what is it? My 5-step strategy for creating your perfect success buffet. The success buffet is a different way that I encourage people to think about their success in terms of ingredients, and thinking about the steps to get there. Excuse me, and that relates to the approach to the creative productivity approach that I use.
Okay.
And so you can go there and sign up and get my 5-step strategy for creating your perfect success buffet, and get a little intro to the success buffet and how micro habits can help you. Micro habits is one of the strategies that I promote for creating that.
Okay, excellent. Micro habits. It sounds so cool. What is a micro habit?
Oh, a micro habit is exactly what it sounds like. It's like a little bit of a habit. So you take, instead of focusing on what you're doing wrong when you might want to make a change, we look at a habit that you have that is working. What are some of the good habits that you have? And then we look at how can we hack that just a little bit with a micro habit and just add a little something in there. Like I had one client who was really struggling. She wanted to work with mindfulness and sorry, it was my dog. Work with mindfulness and just doing some simple meditative exercises in the morning. And so she was really struggling to work that in and to find a way to make that work for her. And so we just hacked her morning routine, while she's brushing her teeth, and doing like a simple, like 1 minute and 11 seconds, little mindfulness breathing thing in there between like getting in the shower and brushing her teeth. So that would be a micro habit.
Okay. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's how make big changes, right? Small little micro habits over time can make huge, transformative, life-changing outcomes over time. And that is how I like to approach things. That's my approach to a lot of things, especially when you have something that you're struggling to get done. I have found micro habits to be a way that really has been helpful for me to make progress with even the most tedious of tasks.
What micro habit are you working on right now? If you can share.
Sure. This.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I get
what we're doing. This is the micro habit that I'm working on. And so one of the things that I do is, and it's one of those, just because you don't succeed, you don't give up. You look at why it didn't work and how you can make it better. But I look for invitations that can be opportunities that I can use as a catalyst. So you and Florin have been very helpful. Florin is going to be promoting the Thrive Economic Development Small Business Roundtable event. And so I'm writing a thing for him, for LinkedIn, for him to share that. So there's some other things that I had lined up that I needed to write. So while I'm doing that for him, I'll go ahead and do that. I have a couple of blog posts that actually are pretty much written. So I can go ahead. So that kind of thing. So try and take the momentum of this is my last scheduled thing, going on the computer to do that. And I can get those 3 things done before I go to bed tonight. So it's not everything, but I'll have a couple of blog posts in the can and a thing to Florin. So that's kind of like a micro habit. Okay. I focus on my top 3 so that I don't get overwhelmed. No matter how long the list of to-dos is, 3 at a time. Prioritize the top 3 things that need to get done before I put my head down on the pillow, and committing to doing those 3 things.
Wow, that's great. That's a powerful micro habit, I think.
Well, it helps when you have a lot to get done and you feel overwhelmed, and rather than not doing anything and feeling bad about that, what are the top 3 that need to get done? Like somebody's waiting on something from me, there's a deadline involved, that kind of thing.
Excellent. Oh, that's really cool. I'm going to steal that one. That's a good one. You mentioned in your bio that
Yeah.
you have you working on the a business case for personal innovation.
Yes. That's where the complex adaptive system thing came from, right?
Okay. Can you
Um,
elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. The business case for personal innovation was an idea that came from a conversation that I was having with a colleague, Alistair Brett, who is a British innovation expert who is
Mhm.
like internationally renowned. And at the time, the conversation we were having was about the resistance of people, innovation circles in particular, we were talking about
Okay.
seeing innovation in broader terms because I am very interested in social innovation. And I have long argued that um, disconnecting social innovation from technology was not going to lead to a good place. And so this was a soapbox I had been on since like the early 2000s. And like nobody's listened. And then social media happened and it became what it was. And for a
Mhm.
while, I sort of gave up and it's like, see, this is what this is what I'm afraid of. And then Alistair and I were talking about, well, clearly I can't just check out, because it went down the way that I didn't want it to go,
Mhm.
and that social innovation had to be part of this. And so we started talking about racism. So this was during pandemic was, everybody was talking about racism
Mhm.
and how that was an obstacle to social and how that was an obstacle to better applying technology to address social issues. And I felt like that was a hindrance in social innovation. And then when you look at the way the tide has turned with DEI, despite all the data supporting how valuable it was to innovation, but it's hard. It was hard. And I think that that was what the paper was about the fact that it was hard. And I was making the case of like, uh, from the risk aversion type lens that I felt that businesses were approaching these issues. Um, I was like, all right, let's apply that lens. And so I look at like the cost of not addressing this,
Mm.
and making the case that one way to address it, like looking at, let's say, DEI as it had been done, I would say was a failure. And there was a lot of data that supported that. And so I was making my case for a different approach to all of that, which was not really even addressing that directly. It's this soul food success buffet, looking at where's our success connected and
Mm.
building from that place, as
Okay.
opposed to telling you all the things that are different about you because you're this and me because I'm that, and then reinforcing those beliefs and then saying, now let's move forward and work together and not be biased. How does that work? Um,
Good point. Right. It doesn't.
And so that's what the business case for personal innovation was about. It's
Okay.
presenting this case of all this evidence of why this doesn't work. And then at the end, explaining a complex adaptive system and how that's a much more useful way of looking at organizations and communities. And then when we look at what we learn from art-based research, which is that communities can't be predefined. Communities are constantly evolving and taking shape, and they literally are taking form around what they create. And so that's the way to approach it. And that's the basis. And I would say the evidence for why an art based approach is the more equitable approach and the most inclusive approach, because art is all about how you include everything. Everything can be art. Everything.
Mhm.
Everybody can be any and everybody can be an artist. Art
Mhm.
is the paradigm for inclusion.
Okay. Who do you see as the key players? You mentioned at one point you I think mentioned um, funding or
Mhm.
budget, um, and to me that means that there's got to be some structure where that comes from and has accountability for it to some degree. Um, so how do you who are the key players right now in that world for you?
Of social
time,
innovation, you mean?
yeah, for yeah, the personal innovation and the business case for it.
Um, I don't really see that. I mean, that's the work, right? That's what I'm trying to find. um,
Okay.
uh,
Okay.
Alistair was the reason I partnered with Alistair is Alistair's a much more straight-laced business person, business consultant type person. And so having him validate that idea was really valuable to
Mhm.
me, but it's still I haven't had any takers on that.
Okay.
So that's not something that I've really explored with a business client yet.
Mhm.
But that was one of the reasons for like putting the paper out there. And it's just like, maybe if I just put it out, somebody will see it and will take me up and at least want to have a conversation about it.
Yeah. Well, innovation in my world, innovation is like everyday thing. It's you're always looking for new ways to be better, and you're always looking for new people to help you to accomplish things you want to do, right? And associations. And you want to be able to reciprocate when
Yeah.
somebody gives you. You want to have something you can give back, and that boosts the relationship. And then being part of that includes a community. So it's having that idea of being a personal innovator is intriguing to me because
Um,
I think of innovation more in terms of a company being innovative, but individuals, personal innovation is a cool concept.
well, I see. Well, again, this idea
Like,
of the
how would you be
complex
an
adaptive.
excellent
I'm
personal
sorry.
innovator?
Say that one more time. You broke
How
up.
how could you become an excellent personal innovator?
Um, the reason for thinking about organizations and businesses as complex adaptive systems is each individual within that system has to increase their individual capacity to innovate. And so what I have observed is a lot of the blockages to innovation, social innovation, which was what I was primarily looking at, but just change in general. When you look at, business change management, community change management, the same barriers keep coming up again and again. And it's
Mm,
the personal individual inability to adapt and to change. That's the obstacle. That's what prevents organizations from being innovative. And so each individual has to take responsibility for their own individual capacity to innovate themselves. And if somebody takes that responsibility, then you've overcome a big part of the hurdle already.
mhm.
But generally, people only take responsibility for resisting change. And
Okay,
that's where it stops.
interesting. Yeah, change is tough. Change is really challenging for everybody.
Um, the only thing that's, we're assured of is like life will change and you will
Yeah,
change.
right. Yeah. So,
If you don't change, you will die. So it's change or end. So
but what I love about what we're talking about here is that you're taking all of that kind of uh, pool of thought in terms of, yeah, we've got this population that's maybe considered disadvantaged, and looking at them as a possibility of innovation. Am I right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then the challenge is, how do we, as a community, help them to understand their value and to actually apply energy towards becoming better and having and getting access to tools that enable them, and resources and people that enable them to fulfill their dreams.
Well, I mean, I feel like the first and the easiest thing is you start with the people who already want that. You know what I mean? Like the people who are already looking for help but don't find it. So you start with those people.
Mhm.
And oftentimes these young people are not the ones that are recruited for internships and opportunities. They're
Yeah.
not thought of for internships or
They probably
apprenticeship.
get cut out. I mean,
Exactly.
businesses are weeding, like, from my personal experience, when I got to be age 55, it became really tough to find jobs for some reason.
Right.
So it's like, shouldn't you be retired by now? I got that from one guy when I was interviewing. So it was like, okay, I know where you're coming from. But so it makes it extra tough. And it forced me to go into a mode where, okay, I'm no longer employable per se. I chose to say, okay, well, I'm going to go out on my own now. It's time. And so, but that was a complete mindset change, is a complete mindset change from being an employee to entrepreneur. And that's another thing I love about what you're doing with Florin is that you're starting early in the early, late teens, early 20s, or maybe earlier, to start talking about the ideas of owning a business and being an entrepreneur and being an innovator and what that takes.
I think we're going to have, I'm thinking that it's going to be 18 to 26 is about the age range that I think we're going to see. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited to develop this. One of the things that I found worked really well working with communities is, rather than telling them all of the components of, this is what I'm going to teach you, is finding out what do they want to learn and what are they struggling with, and then building a program around that. And that's fundamental to like my approach to program development and engaging stakeholders. And that's where you start out right away with you're creating a different culture right away, of that we're in this together and we're creating something together. And that's one of the things that I really love about this is seeing the results. During lockdown, I started a We Freedom Film Festival. And I launched that in about 2 months. And when we first started with with the volunteers that were like 16, 17, up to like maybe 25, the age range. And in the beginning, they're like, we're going to do this when? And then when we did it, they were all like so incredibly impressed with themselves and so proud of themselves. And it was something that they were like, in the beginning, they thought that this was impossible. And just like, but we did this like in like 2.5 months. We launched a film festival, and everybody was like so excited. It was like one of the best experiences, was seeing them achieve something that they were so sure in the beginning was impossible. And then when I told them, like, and we watched Congressman Lewis had just died, and we watched his reading of his memorial letter, and I reminded him, like, that's our evidence that this is possible.
Yeah.
And so we did it.
Excellent. I applaud you. You're not taking the easy road.
Oh, well,
says congratulations.
They were needing some inspiration, and I was we were all needing inspiration. And I was really asking the question of why is everybody just settling on this dystopian future as our default future? And that's one of my projects that I'm looking to come back to, is the film festival project, because I love short films. I still want to galvanize writers and filmmakers around inspiring young people to imagine the world where we actually solve the problems that we're facing, as opposed to just accepting defeat.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Go for it.
Right.
I have Kathy Aaron has asked a question. Would you be okay if I brought that up?
Absolutely.
Yeah. She says, I have a godson in LA who I think is struggling to figure out what to do and how to create a future. He has never been a drug addict and has also never been able to shift to taking adult ownership for his life. And she says, love to hear about resources in LA for him. You have any thoughts on that?
Yes, there's actually a foundation. What is it called? Holistic Play. I think it's called the Holistic Play Foundation. I'll look for it and I'll send it. Jim, do you have that person's contact information?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, I'll find it and I'll forward it to you. But there is
Okay.
actually like a holistic play foundation. They might have some resources that could be helpful because I think it with something like that where somebody's struggling to find their path. You don't want to turn them off with something that feels too rigid and not fun. You want
Hmm.
to get them engaged and inspired and excited first, and then and I would say, like, send them to my website to get the productivity for us and see if the micro habits freebies could get them started. I also have a 21-day challenge that's free when you sign up for that. There's a couple of freebies that might be helpful to somebody struggling with something like that.
Okay. So she could go to YvetteDubel.com.
Productivityforus.com.
Okay. Let me put that up here.
Okay.
I had it. Hang on.
And there's a couple of like very short, like less than 10-minute little like video classes that introduce like how to use what they're given as a freebie. And then the 21-day challenge, you know, see how that goes. But the holistic play that they're in LA, and they have some events going on. And I know that they also do some outreach with young people.
Okay. Excellent. So hope that helps, Kathy Aaron. Thanks for the question. Great question. And she says, thanks, Yvette. He's an adult, not a child. Is it still appropriate?
Yes, yes. This is for adults. This is not just for children. They serve all ages.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, gosh, it's just been a fun interview. It's fun exploring new areas for me. I enjoyed it. I have one more question for you, Yvette. You got another couple minutes?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So here's the question. Taking a look at your whole life, and I ask this of everybody on the show, taking a look at your whole life, what was the boldest leadership decision that you've made, and what were its consequences?
The boldest leadership. I think starting my fatherhood program when I was in North Carolina was probably the boldest because I had no experience working with regional forces. That was when I learned about regional economic development and how all of that worked.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know anything about community reentry programs.
Okay.
And I started a community reentry consortium.
Wow.
And I came up with a whole strategy for that program leading to a hub development project. So I would say that was a bold thing. Like I had an idea and
Ran with it.
I ran with it. And I had no organizational affiliation, no agency connections or anything.
Okay.
So I would say
Wow.
that one.
That is bold. What would you say would be the takeaways, the things that you learned from that experience with the reentry program?
Having more confidence in myself,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. I would say that would be the biggest thing is like having more confidence and knowing what I know. I know what I know. Not letting people give me the runaround and like when you know they're like full of BS. And I wouldn't tolerate that for as long. I don't let that kind of stuff go.
Okay.
That's one of the big. So I think that changed my whole leadership style because at that time I I think I was modeling myself more after male leaders that I thought, had a hold on things. And so I was a very different kind of leader then than I am now.
Okay. Excellent. Well,
I think I'm much more of a team player now.
Okay. All right. Well, I admire your stick-to-itiveness and your focus.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is my passion.
Yeah. Well, excellent. Well, thank you for joining me today on the show.
Thank you so much, Jim, for having me. I've enjoyed this conversation so much. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm going to end the stream. Hang on a sec. Let's chat afterwards. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.